A scripture lesson for tonight comes from Luke's Gospel, last chapter of Luke, chapter 24. It's on verses are on page 1630 in the Pew Bibles. It's a lengthy lesson, but it's a good story. Verses 9 through 35. The women had gone to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body, and his body wasn't there. When they came back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. But the apostles did not believe the women, because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away, wondering to himself what had happened. Now that same day, two of the followers were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one living in Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it's the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but they didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see." Jesus said to them, "How foolish you are, how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself." As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he was going farther. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared now to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. May God add his blessing to this reading of his word, the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. The brave ones, the women, had gone to the tomb to anoint the body of Jesus. Even though Jesus had told his disciples and his other followers numerous times that he had to die and then 3 days later rise from the dead, no one believed him. The women went to the tomb to anoint a dead body. But when the women got there, the stone was rolled away and the tomb was empty. The angels appeared to them and asked them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen." The women then went and told the 11, but they did not believe them. Their words seemed to them like, what was the word used? Nonsense. Peter ran to the empty tomb for himself. He saw the grave clothes of Jesus, and he wondered to himself what had happened. Which brings us to this evening's lesson that tell of the post-resurrection appearance of Jesus on the road to Emmaus. A beautiful account of one of Jesus' important resurrection appearances. The record of this significant post-resurrection appearance is curious in that Jesus appears to two of his followers of whom we know absolutely nothing about, other than one of their names is Cleopas. And yet Jesus appeared to them in a dramatic encounter as they walked from Jerusalem to the village of Emmaus, which is 7 miles west of Jerusalem. Why did Jesus single out these virtually unknown followers as they journeyed to Emmaus, a village that, as far as we know, Jesus had never before visited? And by the way, while we're at it, why don't we have a record of Jesus traveling to Bethany to visit with Mary and Martha and Lazarus? We're told Jesus' closest friends alive outside of the 12. Luke does tell that at the ascension of Jesus, it occurred in the vicinity of Bethany. And I'm going to surmise that Jesus, while he was in the vicinity, he did in fact visit his very good friends, Mary and Martha and Lazarus. Instead, we have this very detailed account of Jesus meeting with these two lesser, we might say, disciples. It's been suggested that the two didn't recognize Jesus because they were walking in a westward direction, and it was late in the day, and they were walking into the sunset, and the sun would have been in their eyes. I suppose it would be similar to this time of year here, driving east on 46 about 7:15 in the morning. And on several stretches, you are looking directly into the sunrise. And man, you can't see a thing. That certainly may have been the case with the sun being in the eyes of Cleopas and his unnamed friend. But I believe that Jesus simply could have kept them from recognizing him until he was ready for their eyes to be open and their hearts. One little tidbit that I take from all of this is that Jesus is so very interested in the least of these, in followers of his. In other words, Jesus is interested in you and me. There were indeed persons beyond the 12 remaining disciples and the women that had visited the tomb. There were others whose lives certainly had been greatly influenced by the person and ministry of Jesus. You know, persons that appear for all practical purposes to be anonymous, faces in the crowd, especially when they are from or are simply passing through a nondescript village named Emmaus. or should we say Mims? Therefore, never underestimate your value in the eyes of Jesus. After all are precious in his sight. Let's go back to Cleopas and his friend. The hopes and dreams of these men had been shattered. They could not believe that this stranger who came to walk with them didn't know anything that had happened over the last 3 days. And so they proceeded to tell their walking companion about Jesus of Nazareth. We had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. How discouraged and heartbroken they were. And then beginning with Moses and the prophets, Jesus explained to them all of the scriptures that told about himself. And hope and peace began to return to the men's hearts as Jesus was able to make sense of all these things that had happened. As they entered Emmaus, Jesus acted as though he was going farther. Jesus didn't force himself on them. He waited for their invitation. Jesus is never going to knock down the door. He may do all manner of things to try to get our attention, but he will never knock down the door. If you study the very famous painting of Jesus standing, knocking at the door, you will notice that there is no doorknob on the outside of the door. Granted, Jesus is obscuring where a doorknob should be located, but my interpretation of the painting is that Jesus is not able to open the door himself. The door can only be opened from the inside. If you are so inclined, you can check out that painting on your favorite electronic device when you get home, please. God has given to all of his children the greatest and most dangerous gift in the world, the gift of free will. Every single person living on the face of the earth since the time of Jesus can use free will to either invite Jesus into your heart, or you can use free will just to allow Jesus to pass on by. They urged him strongly, "Stay with us." And Jesus honored their request. The three men sat down to a meal together. Jesus took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Probably many people think of the sacrament of Holy Communion when they hear Luke describe this meal, but I don't think that's the intent of Jesus here. For this was an ordinary meal in an ordinary house, and an ordinary loaf was being shared. I'm sure it was Hawaiian bread they were sharing. And in this ordinary moment, they recognized Jesus. It's been beautifully suggested that perhaps these two men had been present at the feeding of the 5,000. That's kind of cool, isn't it? And as Jesus broke the bread in this ordinary home on this rather ordinary occasion, they recognized Jesus. It's not only as we receive communion that we can be with Jesus. We can be with him at the dinner table too, as well as when we are fishing or working with wood or etc., etc. Jesus is not only the host at communion in his church, Jesus is the guest in every home as well, even in the most ordinary of moments. Their eyes were open and they recognized Jesus, and then just like that, he was gone. Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? At any rate, with the two men's hearts now burning, the only thing for them to do was to make the 7-mile journey back to Jerusalem to tell the 11 about their encounter with the risen Jesus. And maybe the sun was just beginning to rise as they approached Jerusalem, now walking into the sunrise. Traveling east, the rising sun would have been in their eyes, washing over them. And they went to the 11, and they discovered that the 11 had already come to believe that Jesus was alive because he had appeared in their absence to Simon. And so Cleopas and his friends' excitement and joy were confirmed by the 11. Their hearts were yet burning, and they had to share it. As believers, all of us should possess a passionate burning in our heart as Easter morning dawns every year. And the heartburn should last for more than a day. For this is the best kind of heartburn. A type of burning in our hearts that should be a part of our faith experience for the rest of our lives. Jesus has conquered death, and he is alive.